Get away. Get away, chilly Jordan. I wanna cross over and see my Lord. Yeah, get away. Get away. Get away. Oh, chilly Jordan, wanna cross over and see my Lord. Well, you know, I promised the Lord if He would set me free. Well, I'd go until I find out what the end might be. Well, you know, one day, I was walking along. I heard a voice, but I saw no one. The voice I heard sounded so sweet, child. It came down from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. Get away. Get away. Get back, Chilly Jack. Wanna cross over to see my Lord. Well, you know, one of these days, it won't be long. You're gonna look for me, I'll be gone. Yeah, just a few more risings and setting of the sun. This old battle fought and a victory won. Well, you know, friends I used to love so dear, they gone on to glory and left me here. My feet get cold, my eyes shut, my body's been chilled by the hand of death. You know, tongue glued to the roof of my mouth, folded hands across my breast. You don't have to worry about the way I felt. Sunny man told me he'd be right there. Yeah, my buddy Wings of Love, carrying my soul to heavens up above. They tell me Jordan is deep and wide, but I told my mother I'd see her on the other side. Get away. Get away. Oh, get back. Chili Jack.
Ducks eat bread.
They do. They like it.
I saw you toss the kites on high above the birds about the sky, and all around I heard you pass like lady skirts across the grass. Oh, wind blowing all day long. Oh, wind that sings so loud a song. I saw the different things you did, but always you yourself you hid. I felt you push, I heard you call, I could not see yourself at all. Oh, wind blowing all day long. Oh, wind that sings so loud a song. Oh, you that are so strong and cold to blow, where are you, young or old? Are you a beast of field and tree, or just a stronger child than me? Oh, wind blowing all day long. Oh, wind that sings so loud a song.
This song is called Asynchronous Ontology for Dummies. Circles.
But I'm trying
Round it up.
to
Go.
learn the song.
There is no try. There's only do.
Well, I don't know about the meaning crisis. Left, right, black, white, or other vices. Which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, a proposition, participate procedurally, run in circles, remembering body. We're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping them damn agriculture. Oh boy, holy cannoli. Alright, we're getting there.
You wrote the song, sir. Please, sir.
I wonder if, from my perspective, the proposition, participate procedurally, running in circles, remembering body. We're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping. Oh, shish kebab.
Shish kebab.
You know, tips my finger. Not this one. Kind of go.
Here we go.
I don't know about the meaning crisis, left, right, black, white, or other vices, which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, proposition, procedurally running, participate procedurally, running in circles, remember everybody, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping. And agricultures are whispering sweetly. We're all in pursuit, so need heavy. and Johnson. Ontology of Browning is the bird's eye view. If you really knew, could you really say? Yeah. All right. I think I should be done with that because my fingers are
All my
being
fingers and
bitches.
toes.
Straight up bitches.
All right, all my fingers and toes. Welcome to the Friday morning live stream. We've got a few of our guests in the backstage already. I am going to do what I usually do on Fridays, which is an estuary style conversation. And for the most part, the people who are appearing here have signed up, and they're sort of at random. Some of them will be more familiar faces, and some of them will be less familiar faces, and some of them will be newish faces for you. So let's begin. Well, let's bring in the first signer up, and he has been on the channel before. You're going to have to unmute, and the first round of Estuary are introductions. So introduce yourself.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, I've been on the channel before, briefly with you. I guess mainly I'm jumping on Chad's channel and Chris Howard's channel. And I've been on Mark's 2 times, but that was a while back. So my name is Jeremy. I'm an Irishman. I live in the Netherlands, where we encountered each other. So I suppose I have a very similar story as everybody does, but one dimension that I want to paint on it would be that kind of just to put a spin on the usual PVK JBP JP angle would be that I've been watching you. I think since around 2017, probably maybe 2016. Whereas
2017, if you were 2016, that would have been the Freddie and Paul show only.
Then
So
it must be 2017, probably late 2017, maybe even very early 2018, right? But I was a very passive engager with the TLC and with very occasionally posting, and certainly the thought of going on to a live stream would have been just traumatic even, right? And I don't pick that word lightly. And then the idea of going on a live stream or doing a thing with you would even be like gradations up higher than as a challenge. So what I kind of, the aspect of my story that I kind of would like to try to relate to or to bring out would be, I think there's probably an awful lot of people who are in the corner who've come through the same pipeline and who are taking steps to move from passivity to participation, and in the process you have to maybe do different pathways to get to that, but that's part of my background.
all right, thank you, Jeremy. And yes, the has the new Netherlands Estuary met again yet? Have you been with them again, or?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
They'd be speaking the local language.
Oh, that's right. They're going to do it in Dutch.
Flavor, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's the way it goes. Well, I'm going to bring Elliot. I'm not going to bring you in next. I'm going to bring you probably towards the end, but you're going to have to turn your camera on, Elliot. So I'm going to bring in Dale. There you go. Dale, you are a familiar face here. Born and raised CRC, but in the Lutheran Church, and a coder of particular flight World War II combat video game online. How else do you want to introduce yourself?
Aces High is my game.
Aces High.
Just became an elder lately in the church. They chose me for some reason.
Oh, there you go. It's that white hair.
We had a guest pastor, and he likes to commune at the rail. So I ended up, serving him from the communal cup, giving him the wine last week. So that was a new adventure.
All right. Well, welcome, Dale. It's good to see you here. Bring in an old faithful, Mark D. Parker. Mark has his own channel. Mark is also one of the two hosts of the House of Woo, which is an underappreciated segment of the corner. I always enjoy the House of Woo. You and that Ron Copperman, for whom we have some really fun branding. That's actually some of my favorite branding.
In other news, Ron Copperman was arrested last night after attempting to reveal secret sacred truths of the TLC to an unknown sociologist.
Hold on a second. It's the cops.
Oh no.
Ron Copperman, minister. I set the alarm off. Oh my God, dude.
What's your name, sir?
Ron Copperman. Yeah.
18A.
TLC authorities have indicated that the Copper Man is being held at an undisclosed facility until he repents of his false prophecy. Back to you, Tim.
There you go. So the Copper Man is alive and well in the House of Woo. Mark, what do you have to say for yourself this morning?
I'm wearing Ron's hat right now as we speak. This is the official Copperman cap. We'll be having that as merch soon in the House of Woo.
Woohoo! Merch in the House of Woo. There's a good evangelical.
Oh, well, and then don't forget the blessed hankies. Yeah, we're going to have that whole action working too. But yeah, I nobody was signing up, so I said, well, I'll fill in, and then if there's a sudden surge of interest, and you ended up filling up the slate like in the last hour or something, and it was crazy.
Yeah. I have to work on how I fill these slates on Fridays. I had a note on Bridges of Meaning, and then I put a note out to the members, but I don't think that messaging thing via YouTube really works well. So I'm going to continue playing with, but I really like having a different shuffle each time we do this, because you just get different ideas. And Len Vandesy is coming. I don't know, Len, check your email. If you don't, I sent an email out with the link, so you should get that, because I very much want to see Len participating in this. And we have a rando. He is our own archangel from the ARC conference, who in fact did participate in one of the ARC Estuary meetings, and he will be coming soon for his own rando appearance on the channel, taking advantage of the, if you meet me in person. Claire, I saw someone added a slot 6 on the Google Doc. I didn't add the slot 6, so I don't take write-ins that way, Claire. So another time, I'm sure you'll get in another time. So Elliot,
hello.
Introduce yourself a little bit.
If it helps for Clara just now, I don't have a beard, and I think it's actually genetically impossible for me to get a beard now. Hi, my name's Elliot. I've been a long-time watcher of Paul's channel, a lurker for a very long time. Just to tell you how much I'm on YouTube, I saw Paul post on the link to this thing 17 seconds right after it was posted, and I was like, oh, hey, that's neat. And I met Paul in ARC in London, to which I also got in free. So I never, really earned my way into these things. But here I am.
But here he is. And Elliot very quickly became a friend to a whole bunch of the different ARC participants, being one of those archangels dressed in white that were supposed to give us helpful information. And he was very helpful. So those who hire the archangels next time, if Elliot wants a job, make sure you get him in. Well, Len hasn't come into the room yet. We will wait for Len, but having one person down probably isn't a problem. Those of you who have been around a little bit know how this works. We just did the round of introductions, and now we are going to Elliot, or not just Elliot, but Estuary proceeds as follows. We have a round where we pitch an idea, where we share an idea of something we've been thinking about. It can be something intellectual. It can be something contextual. It can be something personal. It can be something estuarial. But an idea that you'd like to give to the group as a blessed gift to say, I've been chewing on this thing, or this thing has been bothering me, or this thing fascinates me, and I want to hear somebody else talk about this darn thing. And they put it on a virtual table. Then in round 3, we point to something that you haven't put on the table, but somebody else has. The narcissists, of course, always reveal themselves in that round because they only want to talk about what they want to talk about. And that almost never flies. But the creative people somehow triangulate their idea with something somebody else said, and before you know it, they colonize the group, and off the conversation goes. So that is how Estuary works. It's no great mystery. It does, in fact, work very well in person. In fact, it's best in person. And I personally like doing it every week, and we do it at 9 a.m. at Livingstone's. So if you're going to come to Livingstone's to visit me, please come at 9 a.m. to the Estuary group, because that's when we really get to know you. So, and then the fourth round is just play. So it's pitch, point, play. That's how we play the Estuary game. Jeremy, you are not a stranger to the Estuary game. What would you like to pitch this morning? You unmuted, but you are not making any sound. Yeah. The 3 P's of Estuary. That's right, Chad. All right, try it again.
Okay, I've got 2 modes of muting my microphone.
There
That's not what I want to talk about, though. So what I want to talk about is, so Jung had the whole notion of integration, right? Becoming whole, taking all that parts of that and figuring out something. And that's kind of a thing that was being explored within the corner. Was it about 6 or 8 months ago, with parts work and all that type of stuff? It'd be kind of its cousin. And one thing that I've seen, and of course that's really Jordan B. Peterson centric as well. And one thing I have seen is that in my participation in Toastmasters and doing other types of things and doing this type of stuff as well, right? It has made me more whole, right? In the sense of tackling those aspects of me which were blocks to living a fuller life, a more purposeful life. And the more comfortable I've gotten with public speaking, and it has really helped to transform me in ways that I couldn't have linearly plotted, right? So it's a very rich experience. It's perspective changing. It's boosting my participation. And what I've been thinking about is, does Christianity lack the same mechanism to pull me up and to transform me? Because you see, the nice thing about this kind of integration process was that it didn't just stop me in my tracks and go, well, who do you think you are, trying to become a grand old speaker? You should be a bit more humble yourself before the mighty speakers of the world, and just be a good, just do good, right? And I kind of wonder, has Christianity in its current iteration or implementation, or in this current age, failed to pull people like me up because of a fear of excessively boosting the individual? Or has it made a mistake of saying, hey, look to God, don't look to yourself, right? And obviously that's part of it, right? But I want to be pulled up so that when I look to God, I'm in a much more integral position to do so in a richer and more full way. So that's my thought.
All right, that is quite a pitch. Well done, Jeremy. Good pitch. Dale, you are muted. So what would you like to pitch to the group?
I was just last couple of years, I've always been curious about your thought processes on Tulip, mainly two of the pieces, where they differ from the Lutheran Church. I'm not 100% sold on the Lutheran view, but I understand where their viewpoint comes from, and it's just really strange. It's mainly the limited atonement and the irresistible grace type stuff.
Okay. I'm sure Len is listening to that. It's a regular topic on Voices that comes around. So thank you very much, Dale. Mark D. Parker, what would you like to pitch to the group?
Something, maybe it's adjacent to what Jer was talking about. as I think we were behind the scenes in the email. I mentioned that the trads might be not around so much because they've given up YouTube for Lent, and it's true. I know a couple, and there's probably many more that I don't know in the corner. But which made me think, well, why are you here, and why am I here? Which goes to what's the point of being a Christian? What's the nature? What's the substance of it? Is it all about a kind of fellowship as consumption, or is it to be here to carry one another's burdens? And so if you're here for ministry, giving up your ministry for Lent doesn't quite compute. If you're here to be entertained or amused or intellectually stimulated, then maybe I can see it. So that's my pitch. And they're not here to defend themselves, the poor bastards. So the vultures are circling.
The vultures are circling. Well done. Well done, Mark D. Parker. Okay, Elliot, as your first appearance on the channel, in the Bible, first words are always important. So what's your pitch for us this morning, Elliot?
I was listening to a lot of your videos as of recently. In fact, I haven't finished one just before I got the link to go here about the lions and the fox culture, and to the dismay of that guy on Twitter who's kind of sick of this conversation. I'm very interested in actually bringing it back up. I'm thinking the way that it's, especially in your Substack, where the AI had a summary of what fox culture and lion culture were. It seems like the TLC and sort of the conversations around here, it feels very like fox culture. It's not very structural. It's sort of like very, a lot of negotiation. Not many people like to, well, you have a few people, but the general tendency seems to sort of be very friendly and negotiable. And so I guess, where could the TLC incorporate more lion culture sort of like features into itself, integrating it in a way, I guess. Yeah, that's my pitch.
Interesting pitch. Okay, Len, welcome. Thank you for signing up and joining us. You've been around the Estuary thing. Well, give a little bit of introduction and then give us your pitch.
Yeah, well, I'm a colleague of Paul. I'm also a Christian Reformed minister, retired. Well, you aren't retired, obviously. But I'm still working at various things. I'm not regular around the TLC. I really don't, Paul, I'm sorry, I don't listen to the channel all that much. I got an email this morning from you and saying you're doing this. So I haven't got, what the hell, I can do this afternoon. I'll join in. So here I am.
All right. Did you signed up yourself, or did someone else sign you up?
I signed up myself.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, but see, the trouble is they were telling me I had to pay.
Oh no! You don't have
to. I paid my money, but I'm going to cancel it right after.
Yeah, no, you don't have to come onto one of these live streams. You don't have to pay StreamYard.
Gotcha. All right. But I was interested in what Dale brought up. I'm into that stuff. I like theology a lot. I love to talk about it. I'd love to come into what Dale talked about from a little different angle. I'm more on the Universalist side. So I call myself a Calvinist Universalist. So if you start with Calvin, who believes that God is all-knowing and all-powerful and loves all of creation, then instead of God saying, there's a few people that I'd like to save, the rest of them go to hell, I think that we're forced to say that God is going to choose all of them.
Okay. Oh boy, Len. If there's one thing in the corner that always sets the nerves jingling, it's the Universalist. At second, probably the one light after it is the Trinity. So we will go.
I just taught a class actually at Calvin. Well, Calvin, the adult learning program they have there. I taught a class, and astoundingly, titled Christian Universalism, I had 150 people sign up. These are people over 65.
Yep.
Very interested in the subject. So
yep. I am not surprised in the least. I think our own corner Unitarian, Sam Tiedemann, very smart man, told me, he says, I think beneath a lot of the conflict in the Christian Reformed Church right now is actually universalism, and I think that's true.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, but now we've had our pitches, and now we point. So Jeremy, what did someone else put on the table that you'd like to point to and say, that's interesting, and why?
I liked Mark's point about the if you're carrying others' burdens and what it means to switch on to switch off, from burdens, and what do you do in that regard? So I'd probably pick that, but I'd like to somehow or other shoehorn in lion culture and universalism as well, as it always must, right? But yeah, I'd probably pick Marx, I think.
All right, we have one person in our local estuary, and she has a terrible time picking between the things, and it's really bothersome for me because I have to rank order them. That's part of the reason we do the point round. And if she chooses them all, so it's like, I understand that maybe all of these pitches are like your children. You love them all the same. But tell me which one you want to talk about the most right now or something like that. So at least I can rank order them to sort of guide the group into the beginnings of the conversation. Dale, what say you? What would you like to talk about?
I picked Leonard's Universalism because I have no idea. I've never even heard of it. So
okay. Calvinist Universalism. I think, oh boy, yeah. See, the thing is, Len is a retired Christian Reformed minister, and I am not. And especially right now in the denomination,
Paul, you don't have to pick parts. No.
We are a confessionally aware denomination right now. So, okay. So, Mark, what would you like to point to?
I think you can shoehorn in the universalism and the lion culture, fox culture discussion into what Jer and I are talking about too. But I am, just because Nate was so annoyed by your discussion on your videos about lion culture and such, that I can't help but just want to scratch that itch some more, because he seems rather annoyed. I'm not sure why that would be so annoying. Wake me up when the corner has moved on to something else. That's interesting. But yeah, it's because I think it goes to the cultural Christianity discussion, and Christian nationalism to some degree, and which goes to the heart of what it means to be a Christian. And to me, it's like, to me, being a follower of Jesus is to annoy everybody in power, and basically annoy everybody on a fairly regular basis. And so, yeah, I think we can fit it all together, but I definitely don't want to leave out your current content.
Okay.
stream.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Elliot, what would you like to point to?
I'm really fascinated by both Dale and Leonard's thing about Tulip and Calvinist, Universalism. I'd like to go into this. Me going into this, I go with a little bit of fear and trembling, because chances are most of these people have been reading about this longer than I've been alive, and that's a bit of a scary thought. But I think it'll be really interesting to dive into.
Okay. All right. Another Tulip Calvin Universalist. Len, your pitch is right up there in the competition, but you have to point to something else, and it might actually, the way it works usually is, especially topics like these, the conversation will get around to a lot of them. So it's more about where to begin and how it flows. So Len, what would you like to point to?
Yeah, I'll point to Jer. I was intrigued by what he was talking about in the that sense of how God is calling us and what God is calling us to, and putting yourself forward as opposed to just humbly being service somewhere. That all those questions are really interesting. And I forgot it was Lent. No, I didn't really. But
Len, you'd have gotten yourself in your own brand of church trouble by admitting that.
Yeah. No, I really didn't. But anyway, yeah, I'd be intrigued to talk more about what Jared brought up.
Yeah. I too, I didn't pitch anything because I put out so much content. I feel I put my pitches out all the time, and they usually come up here anyway. But I also was really sort of colonized by Jeremy's topic as well, because I've been doing a lot of thinking on when we say Christianity, we're talking about a thing. Now it's a huge thing, and it's a really difficult thing to actually talk about, because actually this kind of gets into a lot of the deeper questions I have about what I think has been sort of a dominant, rather blobbish religion that we've had since the Second World War, of which Hiroshima and Auschwitz have been sacred emblems. And that's been something that I've touched on in my channel recently. And that will probably be something that pushes away the lions and the foxes for a little while, so that Nate Heil can breathe a little bit easier. But with the way Jeremy was talking about it, that really, and I think I saw Len's eyes lighting up there too, because as a pastor, pastors play in theology, pastors play with structure and culture and even politics sometimes. But I think what sort of differentiates pastors from other aspects is we're really interested in people and what's happening inside of them in terms of the transformations and these subtle questions that Jeremy, I think, nicely put on the table. But that sort of presents us with a problem here because of the vote getting. Yeah, we're sort of all over the map. And so I think lion culture, fox culture, Calvinist Universalism, and giving up things for Lent are all high topics too. So let's play. And probably whoever sort of makes a strong speech now will probably win the next 15 minutes.
Well, just from my perspective, I really haven't read the stuff about lion culture, fox culture. So I'm I don't understand so if somebody's going to have to explain a little bit the topic to me, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, I've been a number of my videos. In fact, I made a video this morning about the Christian Reformed Church, and this I think will definitely interest you, Len. That what we've seen happening in the culture recently has been a return to lion culture, and this comes from an observation by Pareto, who was an Italian economist, mathematician, political philosopher, sort of at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, that said, basically, politics is governed by groups of elites, and these elites tend to cycle between lion cultures and fox cultures. Lion cultures are generally more conservative, they're more populist, they're more comfortable with use of power and force to get their way, forcing decisions. Fox cultures are a little bit more evasive, a little bit more egalitarian, a little bit more negotiating to find pragmatic solutions. And I think after the 19th century was heavily a lion culture century, where you had colonial powers unafraid to exert their power even at great cost. And then you'd have what happens in the 20th century. I think everyone, after two exhausting world wars, just sort of wants peace. And after at least the Cold War settles down, everybody sort of is like, well, we'll just let America be the lion, because it's a very foxy lion, and it's sort of tender in terms of its imperial aspirations. It wants all the countries to stay in their nice little packages. But one of the things that we've been seeing, I think, is a swing back towards lionish behavior. And I think we've seen that in the Christian Reformed Church with now, while Christian Reformed Church that you and I know, Len, from years ago was very much about boundary keeping and meeting with the council before you could partake in communion, and very confessionally observant. We went into a period where maybe a few churches would say they practiced open communion, but practically speaking, they were. Everyone, the church discipline very seldom practiced. Everything was sort of, and now suddenly with these last few synods, everything tightens up again, and we're going to pay attention, and people are going to say yes and no to things, and so just kind of the going back and forth between these cultures, and I think part of why Nate Heil, when I first started mentioning it, he messaged me very strongly that this is I should not be talking this way. This is not something we should even think about. And Nate, of course, is a Christian anarchist. And so if there's anything sort of against Lionism, it's anarchism. And so, but he's also a universalist. So, or sort of it's really hard with Nate because Nate has such subtle complexities in his own matrix. So, and so I've been looking at that those lion impulses and sort of the swing back to that sort of thing. And actually, I was thinking the other day, Len, to sort of cross into the Calvinist universalism. Universalism is fairly lionish too, because just as you said, and I've had the similar thoughts that you had about Calvinism, if people object strongly to the exclusionary aspects of some elements of TULIP, limited atonement, irresistible grace. But if you sort of see God as you've mentioned on Voices a number of times, a number of church fathers have, that lionish nature of God basically says, well, how really will a human will that is having to endure eternity by sharing the same universe with such a God really going to resist forever? And so, but that brings up all kinds of other issues. So, that's some of the lion culture, fox culture stuff that I've been talking about.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I could throw on maybe a different spin on that slightly, would be that one of the things that I think is underappreciated about lion culture is that lion culture could be called progressive, in the sense of it's always moving forward. It's seeking a direction and an expansion, and it's highly energetic. Whereas fox culture is administrative, tactical, bureaucratic. Right? It's IBM. And in that sense, fox culture is highly conservative, but it's conserving that domain, that field of play that it already exists within. And a lion just kind of goes, no, pitch is moving, right?
That's right.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'd be interested, Jeremy, to hear you talk more about your pitch, because your pitch really did capture me. And so I this morning I read Ryan Burge is somebody that I read on Substack very regularly. He's the guy, Religion with Graphs, and he's always doing statistical things. And I'm a believer that statistics is very limited in terms of what it can tell us. But we are, and have been, I think, for a long time. I mean, Gandhi said as much when responding to the very lionish culture of the Raj in India, that he's very intrigued by Jesus, but the system that he saw of Christianity in some ways sort of left him cold. And I heard and correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard in your pitch something that I hear in a lot of people, that Jesus continues to sort of quietly colonize, but a big issue right now, I think, that churches are struggling to keep up with Jesus. I'll say it that way. And when we talk about Christianity,
Yeah. So I would play it into the whole fox and lion thing as well, because like civilizationally, up to about pre first round of globalization, we lived in a very dynamic world, which asked an awful lot of people. It was a world that invited you to be a lion, whether not in a sense of Napoleon, but a lion in the sense of get up, go to work hard, and then you'll die. Right? It asked everything of you. And in that sense, it had this kind of maximal impact on you. And the church itself didn't necessarily need to worry about that aspect of people's characters, because that was being taken care of by the hardships of society. And what happened in Ireland, and I'll be brief on this, what happened in Ireland was that in the 1860s, the Catholic Church was elevated into a position of power by the British, because it allowed a way to channel in more calm direction some of the anger that was beginning to bubble out into armed conflict. So that Ireland certainly became a fox culture church, and I kind of think that the church has an element of excessive fox culture about it, a type of staticness. And I don't mean liturgy or tradition, because I think these are extremely valuable things, but I think there's a type of staticness about how it's reaching out to people, and if I could just give one example, which I always liked from Zen, was a story about a guy who's talking to his Zen master, and he can't unravel the puzzle that he's been set until he kicks a stone, and upon kicking the stone, it just drops into a pond or something like that. And at that moment, that's what it took to unlock him. So in the same sense, has the church, the modern church, at least I'm more thinking about the Catholic Church, but we're all globalized now, right? So I'm at least as influenced by the Protestant world. But does the church have 101 different tricks, in which approaches where it can help me to turn my head, right? Where it can help me to direct myself in the right direction, pulling me forward up as an individual at the same time. So that at the very least, somewhat like a C.S. Lewis or a Jordan Peterson character, that even if I never made it home, I'd be a damn lot better than I was before I went in. And that's kind of part of what I'm thinking about.
Can I ask a question there? So when you say like whether the church can do certain things or it has certain approaches to help you to move forward, would you mean that the church as in like whoever's in charge of the church, or would that include like the people in the congregation to help as well, like being part of the community and engaging in stuff like that? Or like, yeah, so where would it come from? Or is it just in general?
These are very good and valid questions. From my perspective, it's more how I'm relating, or at least perceiving, the whole culture of the church, and ready to be called but waiting by the telephone kind of vibe, right? So, but you're right, and I suspect that element of the congregation is part of the answer that I'm probably going to have to toy with soon enough.
Can I share something about the fox lion thing? So it has something to do with power, right? So I ran across one of my favorite people on Substack is Chris Green, who's I think a tremendous theologian, and so he's writing about Pentecostals, and he's complaining about on the fact that there's a text in Zechariah, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. And he says, a lot of Pentecostals are forgetting that a lot. They want power. They want to be with the president and, bless that and prophesy about what's going on. So anyhow, he's writing on that in that context. And then this is what he closes with. Thus, strange as it may sound to our ears, we must say that God is not powerful. Indeed, God has no power at all. God cannot, as God, exert power over creation, no more than God can lie. That's very provocative. To say that God has no power is not, of course, to suggest divine impotence. Rather, it is to acknowledge that God cannot be described in terms of potentials and actualization, as though divine action were a matter of something, sometimes doing this, sometimes that, now with great effect, now with less. God is not a being who possesses power and occasionally deploys it. God simply is an unchanging, endless fullness, the internal act of the Father glorifying Jesus through the Spirit. This is what we mean when we speak of God's work. Not occasional interventions or supernatural displays, but the ceaseless performance of Christ's exaltation through which all things are being led and in ways we can neither trace nor control toward their transfiguration in the created goodness of God. And that's what fulfills the prophecy that he's saying. So, but I was just really struck by that. God is not powerful in the sense that we usually talk about it. And I've been thinking for a long time about, we're always expecting God to intervene in creation. Whereas God's idea of creation, it seems to me, and sort of the evolution kind of expresses this as well. God wants creation to flower. God wants human beings to do stuff, not waiting for God to do stuff. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out in terms of the dynamic that we're talking about.
Ooh, Mr. Cotter.
Go, Dale. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to raise your hand.
Struck me as two thoughts. First, when he's describing God that way, and I'm not totally in disagreement with what he's talking about, he's very much describing your God number one. Is that you're just defining a complete set of rules that God set up the universe, and this is the way things work. But then in his second part, where he uses the word God wants, if God wants something, he can make a choice. Therefore, it contradicts what his first statement was. So I think he's really just in a lot of ways describing the difference between God number one and God number two. If you don't view God as a personalized God, then he's just all God number one, and prayer to him directly would make no difference. He would never do an intervention or anything like that. Then prayer would all be about just changing your own attitudes to adhere to God's universal rules.
And God number one, God number two thing, of course, is sort of these two buckets on my workbench that I throw things in. My theological workbench, and yeah, Chris Green, very much as Chad said, yeah, Len is very much a Grail Country CRC guy, and Len is not unknown to Grail Country, and Chris Green regularly shows up on Grail Country, and Chris will be at another estuary event, the Southeast Estuary, that is currently being put together, I think, for October.
Where is that going to be played?
What's that?
You have to tell me more about that.
Yeah. So Chris is a really beautiful theologian in how Chris sort of weaves these things together. But I think you're right, Dale, that on one hand, part of what's difficult, obviously, about language and about descriptions like this is if you know Chris and you hear this, it's very Chris, it very fits. If you don't know Chris, what he described could sort of slide off into the God of Aristotle. And this God of Aristotle is definitely not the kind of warrior choosing, lionish God that is going to be a Calvinist universalist, perhaps, unless he's, again, much more arenic in terms of like gravity always wins. But then, but of course, in the Christian story, you get a God you get a triune God who is incarnate in Jesus, and Christians look to Jesus to work on this question of what on earth do we mean by power, because this is something that I think as I'm preaching through Jesus on the way to Jerusalem, on the way to cross, through Lent right now, all these questions of power are so salient. Because I think, Kenneth Bailey is right, just thinking about the sermon I'm preaching this Sunday, that everyone is looking to Jesus to fix the Roman problem. And many of the people, possibly especially Judas, is furious with Jesus at the way he is not addressing the corruption of young Jewish girls in prostitution, or the corruption of young Jewish boys in tax farming, and Jesus, don't you understand God's justice for his chosen people and his chosen land? Why don't you use the kinds of power that would still a storm to make a storm? Why don't you use the kinds of power that would raise the dead to make the dead? Jesus, why don't you clearly take sides in our culture war and resolve the Roman problem in the way that Samson did to the Philistines or David did to the Philistines? And so that, part of how Jesus so changes the script in Christianity has everything to do with this question of power. And so Chris's, that little quote out of Chris, obviously sort of, now we're scrambling the omnipotent God and saying, well, what really do we mean by this word? Mm-hmm. And to get back in a much more personal level to you, Jeremy, I think in a consumer way, in this time of pluralism, people look at the various booths in the consumer religious marketplace and they say, I need some transformation. Will the Buddhists help transform me? What does the church have to offer? And I think a lot of people are looking at the church and saying, the church doesn't seem to have any power. And the power it used to wield, let's say in Ireland, through the Catholics, or maybe even through the Church of Ireland as a velveted glove of the hand of the English. I mean, so these, and this is again all over Fox and Lion culture too. And so people on one hand are asking God, show your power, and asking Jesus, show your power. And of course, he says, I'll show you my power. We're going to go down to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be turned over into the hands of men and crucified, and on third day rise from the dead. And of course, nobody pays any attention to the rise from the dead. They don't show up, with gifts for Jesus as he comes out of the tomb. So, you're exactly right that in Christianity, this question of, does God act? If so, how, where, what is power?
Well, it's in the headlines every day. What parts of the church want today is to bring God back into the schools, to bring God back into government, to bring God back into this and that, and it's a power move, as though God is interested in showing His power by taking over this or that aspect of life in this world. And you're exactly right, Paul. God showed His power by dying on a cross. And that is, to me, that is the lesson of Christianity today. That's what we need to learn again. That's that we belong under the cross. That's what Bonhoeffer learned back in those sad days.
But he learned it because he conspired in a plot to
That's
assassinate Führer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these, I think, Jer, part of what, you're wrestling with is, and what consumer Christianity and consumer religion in our culture wrestles with. I think as a culture, we've come to the point where we used to think that psychology and sociology would fix us. Well, that's increasingly abandoned. You can pay a psychologist a lot of money for a lot of years and still discover you're staring in the mirror. And people look to religion for power. And so they're playing with psychedelics and Mark, we haven't really heard from you. Have you frozen again? I think Mark's out. No, he isn't frozen. Because Mark's story is such an interesting one. Here you have Mark of one of the two presiders over the House of Wu, and he's a Christian because his Buddhist master sent him back. And Mark,
Really?
and I loved Mark's pitch because Mark's pitch was very Jesus-like, which is, people are skeptical about miracles and they're skeptical about all sorts of things about Jesus. The one thing it seems to me you can't be skeptical about is that Jesus was sufficiently annoying to have both sides of his culture war say, yeah, we hate you enough to kill you, but let's have a temporary truce so we can get that guy, because we can all agree he's really troublesome.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I'm both a Pentecostal. Oh, I'm getting feedback. That's weird.
You sound okay on this end.
Okay, good. I'm both a Pentecostal and something of a Buddhist. I wake up every day hoping to hear from God, which is why I call myself a Pentecostal. But there are times when I don't hear. That sucks. I'm sorry that the echo is really bad on my end, so I want to reconnect and then try to talk to you guys again.
Okay, all right.
One of the thoughts that you just talking about power made me flash back was people searching for the magic God to just fix things for them. Reminded me a lot of the viewpoint that, man, it must be really cool to be the boss of a whole bunch of people because you get to go do anything you want. Okay, and it's like, well, that's sort of exactly God's situation in a lot of ways. Yeah, it sounds that way until you realize all the things you have to fulfill and do, and now your hands are bound in a lot of ways.
I think Mark, we got feedback now.
Now I'm getting feedback.
Yeah, if you put in some headphones, it'll probably work.
I think something that was mentioned in my church not so long ago by one of the pastors was one of God's favorite ways to work in the world is through people, and he mentioned this because he had an injury where he had to get to the hospital, and he was sort of like, you're in a situation like that and you're kind of like, wow, thanks God for that. But he really said that he felt the love of God in that moment because of the outpouring of love of the people around him as well. And so it's sort of similar to what Len, you said earlier about God and his power, or how he doesn't use power, is because there's an aspect of it that God wants us to act, that he enjoys bringing us and weaving us into the story to engage. And so maybe that's part of the way to talk to Jeremy's question. Is it Jeremy? To Jer's question about like how does God sort of move you forward as you look towards him, and in part it'll be by the action of people, both you and the people around you. I just last night I had a bunch of guys from my church come over to my house and have just for like a night of meeting up, chatting, and all that kind of stuff. And it's conversations like that and the people around it really like help move things forward, which is part of why I asked about the whole thing with the congregation and is it just from the leadership or is it by engaging with the people? Because I found that it is by engaging with people that you see these things. And I have to be careful with that because I don't want to say something like that God doesn't actually move and it's just the people. But there's a way that God uses people to move ourselves forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very interesting. And I want to kind of pull what you've said together with what Dale said, because what kind of came into my mind was that no, God isn't waiting. God isn't waiting to intervene on your behalf to elevate you. And I think the Peterson wave and so on shows that there's a very large cohort of people who weren't waiting for God to elevate them and to fulfill them, right? But they were, either looking for an instrument, or they were looking for of him, or whether they knew it or not, or a strategy that would suddenly unlock them, and then the waters burst forward. And I wonder, Dale, you're coming from a different tradition to me, but do you think that the church is leaning a bit heavily on the idea that God isn't waiting for you to call him, but at the same time it still wants people just to be passive? It tends to passively encourage them to just sit there, adhere to certain things, and then it's like you don't need to wait for him to call you, but at the same time, wait for him to call you, right? He'll tell you when you're ready, but don't worry, he's not gonna call you. Do you know what I mean? Is there a tension there? Or?
I know what you're talking about, but I think it depends a lot when you say the church, which side you're looking at. If you're looking at like a Baptist or a Pentecostal type stuff, yeah, that might be more of the case. But when you get into more of the CRC type stuff or the Lutheran of a much more conservative type tradition, being called, like we've just had a big argument in our church. It has to do with the technical calls, whether we have to call teachers formally for the church, if they need a calling, that type of thing, and what does calling really mean? Okay. Where in our view, calling doesn't have to be an absolutely, okay, I'm absolutely no doubt I'm called. It's just more of a, this is the way I feel like I should be headed, type thing. So if you're waiting for the first sense, like, the magic moment to happen to you where you got no doubt which way you got to go, I don't think that's the way he works. He might on sometimes, but if you're just constantly keeping your eye on Jesus, you just have the feeling which way you should go. So it's neither both, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Keller had this sermon, God's Plans, Your Plans, or something along those lines, where he talks about the way that, how does it work, where God's in control and we have our decisions and whatnot. And one of the things he mentions in there was some people are like, I just really want to know what God's will is. What is God's will for me? And his thing was always make a decision, because that's how God works in the world. He works with our decisions alongside it. And if you're on the more Calvinist strain of things, I suppose that's like, he's ultimately in control. So whatever decision goes forward there, that's already integrated into the story.
I think you can do a lot of damage. Yep. Mic check. Are we good?
Yep.
I think you can do a lot of damage if you just make decisions without being mindful of your own motivations and your own influences. So that's the Buddhist angle for me. There's a great deal of attention paid to my own state of mind, my orientation, how I'm directing myself, how I'm adjusting my behavior, conduct, and interactions with others in a very moment-to-moment sort of way. And things tend to go off the rails when I forget. On the other hand, there is a kind of singular ethical focus that Jesus provides us that I find very helpful, so that when my mind, because I have a history of significant mental disorders, depression, major depression, bipolar disorder, and that sort of thing. In the worst moments, the guardrails kind of kept me from going too far astray. So that even if I was felt motivated to, call it quits, to self-delete, I could never find a way to fulfill that wish without hurting others, and not hurting others particularly closest to me, but even not close to me, but just that was enough of a restraint. That was a higher priority than relieving myself of this pain. Which one last thought goes to what, in the world of lions and foxes and bears, it seems to me the Christian duty is to be neither a fox nor a lion, but to, and not to necessarily be food for them either, but to move through the world in a way that's intentional and salvific, that will that we don't be there ready with like medics in a battlefield. You know, we're just be present, and you people will have your chaos, and you'll do your thing, and you'll try to build your empires, and you'll try to tear them down. And whatever all the people who feel the need to play in the world in this way, it's that not judge. I won't judge you. I'm here to mend your wounds, minister to your needs. At times, if I have to, maybe hold you, restrain you, try to put myself in the way of those you would do harm to. I mean, it's multifaceted and very, very complicated, but it's just a matter of being present in the world, which goes back to my original pitch with the trads of why are you, if you're giving up this for Lent, then why are you here? Would be my question. So.
One of the things that strikes me, and I'd love to hear Len talk about this too, because Len's pastored longer than I have. In the sort of regular, unrecorded life of the church, there's all sorts of living with this tension of, one of the things you're doing as a pastor all the time is praying for people, praying with people. And so many of those prayers are for, maybe my husband would stop drinking, or maybe my wife would be healed from the cancer or the mental illness or the personality disorder. So-and-so has just gotten sick. And if they die, the entire family system around them will likely sort of collapse, because this one person who has, who is very ill is the one linchpin sort of keeping the whole family together. And actually, Len and I go way back, because back when I was in seminary, as a seminary thing, I had to put together an event. And so with Dave Beelan, we put together a Signs and Wonders conference, because that was sort of a heyday of stuff was going on at Fuller. And Len was our speaker, and Dave Beelan said, "Oh, you should get Len Vandersee come in to speak with that." And, part of this question about, me and the House of Wu are not skeptics about the miraculous ability of God to heal diseases to our surprise and to the doctor's surprises. But and I think this is true in the Gospels as well, it doesn't quite work the way secular materialists think human beings do, because disciples who had witnessed hundreds of miracles quickly doubt when a servant girl across from the fire leans in on you and says, "You're one of his disciples, aren't you?" And so all of that miraculous show sort of goes out the window. And whether you're a church that, regularly seeks out the miraculous power of God to heal and to save, or a church that sort of keeps praying but has seldom seen something that they would say, whisper to their unbelieving neighbor about God doing miracles, the church lives in that tension of faithfulness, of so often what feels like unanswered prayer, and yet praying still. And it's something about that praying still in the context of answered prayer that actually displays a power of God that I think is very much what Chris Green was writing about.
Yeah. It's just, I recalled one of my favorite books is The Diaries of Eddie Hillesum. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's like a 500-page book of everything she wrote. As a young woman in Netherlands, Jewish, was finally captured by the German army and was ready to be shipped off to, she died in Dachau. She left diaries and notes all over the place, and they were somehow, by God's grace, collected. One of the most startling ones to me is that she wrote she wrote in her diary a prayer to God. She was just ready to be shipped off, and she said to God, I know that you can't do anything about this, but I'm going to be your person wherever you send me. And I'm going to show your love in whatever way I can. And now, she was a Jew. She knew about Jesus, and she was familiar with the New Testament. But that, to me, is the expression of the depth and height of discipleship. And the part about not knowing you can't do anything about this was that perception on her part that God was not going to directly intervene at that moment in the terrible things that were going on. And you say, why doesn't God interfere in these terrible things with millions of people being killed? I don't have an answer to that question. But her answer was, okay, you can't do that for whatever reason you have, but I'm going to be faithful to you. That's powerful to me.
Paul, you've had an example you've used in some of your videos before about this old lady who's kind of like in a hospital, who's like
Mabel.
Mabel, yes, Mabel, and she can't. She's like stuck in all sorts of different ways, and there's a power in her because she, even in all of that, she can say that God is good to her, and after you've mentioned that, it sort of flicked a thing in my head where I'm like, oh, where can I see this stuff? And I think in the small and simple ways you see it, in the hidden parts of the church. There's a lady in the home group that I go to who's gone through a pretty rough time in her life. There was a pretty messy divorce and everything, and a rough situation. But at one point when there was a prayer meeting and they were talking about praying for her situation and going like, please God, please help with all of these things. Her only prayer that night was, yes, God, but you're still good to me. And I thank you for that. And that's the kind of power that you see in these situations where God doesn't answer. And every single one of them, I go like, how do you have that?
Be careful what you ask for.
Oh yeah.
And Sir Jer, and how that intersects with your pitch. So often, I pastor this little dying church, and yesterday I was standing in the parking lot with Chemo, and Chemo's getting baptized next month, and Chemo, he's just got this amazing story. He's our pianist right now at church. Basically learned piano on the job as the church pianist, and he says to me yesterday something to the effect of, "This place really is kind of crazy." And I'm like, yeah, it's very crazy. But the kind of stuff that, Len, you just talked about, and Elliot, you just talked about, churches, there are some churches that have the kind of charism, I'll use that word, where you go in there and miracles are happening and it's dramatic, and they usually attract a lot of consumers because people are looking for an answer, and they're looking for a revelation, and they're looking for deliverance. And I don't criticize that at all. If God decides to do that at a time and place, praise God that the lame walk and the blind see and the deaf hear. Praise God. I'm all for it. But so often the riches of the church are very much just like you described, Elliot, where go into this place where, gosh, God doesn't seem to be doing anything here. And, maybe the sermons are sort of crappy, and the music, maybe it'd be better if they didn't play anything at all. And the building is sort of coming down around. But if you come and you sit and you watch and you listen, you might realize that there's a reason that this thing is still going. And it's one of these, I think, like, Chris Green's, a quiet, strange thing where there's a saint here that no one will see unless they might require 2 or 3 years to actually spot that saint. But once you see them, it's like, oh, and then you realize Jesus says a number of times, for those who have eyes to see. well, what on earth do you mean by that, Jesus? Well, I think that's what Jesus means by that, that Jesus can be big and bold and have, feed thousands of people. And then he can be so hated, they want to kill him, and so feared that even those closest to him are too afraid to ask a question.
I sense a through line from Mark, Len, Elliot, and you, Paul. And just to run with that, Mark, you had mentioned about the practice of Buddhism and how that created within you a sense of careful attending to your environment and your reaction to it. And what jumped into my mind was a nice interpretation I'd seen of Eve when she sees the apple, and when she sees the apple, multiple spirits and wants and desires become present within her. She sees it. It looks good. The appeal to the eyes. She desires it. And she has the desire for all these little things. And if she had been a careful attender to, then maybe she might have been able to resist some of those things. And I felt that's kind of what Len, you and Elliot were pulling out, was this notion of being a close attender to, to what am I attending to? I'm attending to the higher plan of God, and you're almost to attend towards it is to stretch out towards it, right? To reach towards it is the literal meaning, I think. And I think that's kind of similar to what you're saying, Paul, right? It's like, go, sit, watch, reach out in many different senses and just watch and wait and see, right? There's a lot of things in front of you.
It's sort of Ian McGilchrist's contribution right now that, if you had to distill Ian McGilchrist into one word, it would be attend.
Yeah.
Attend to the world.
The big picture,
yeah. Yeah. And this gets to recently Nathan Jacobs did 3 episodes on his podcast. Do you know Nathan, Len? Was he around?
Yes, I've met him through. I've listened to the Grail Country, right?
I don't think Nathan's been on Grail Country. Nathan Jacobs got his PhD at Calvin Sem.
Oh, okay.
A few years ago.
Then I probably don't know.
Yeah, he teaches at Vanderbilt.
Who's the guy that's on Grail Country? It's Nate, isn't it?
Yeah, Nate Heil. Yeah,
okay,
that's Nate Heil.
I thought you were talking about him.
No, so Nathan Jacobs had a lovely, had a really wonderful 3-part question on the hiddenness of God. He had done he after getting his PhD at Calvin Sem and studying under Richard Mueller, he decides to join the Orthodox Church. So but he had been asked by a group of Orthodox clergy to do some work on the nuns, those who are religiously unaffiliated. And so he did a lot of work on that. And he made I thought, quite a good film about that. And the thing that he noted in that work is so often what's sort of similar to what you were saying, Jerry, what people look at the church and they're like, I expect to go in the church and sort of like a Roman general see God. And there are times when God shows up in the tabernacle and God shows up in the temple and God shows up on the Mount of Transfiguration. But the presence of God, and I would to link back to what Len had said, the power of God is a thing that is not to our assumptions. And so it requires attending. And one of the things I love about your story, Mark, is long term. If you want Mark's story, go to his channel, Mark D. Parker. He's got a couple of really nice self-rando videos on his channel where he talks about his long walk with bipolar, and what that does to a marriage, what that does to a life, and And I think, as you know, named Elliot too, when you pray to become a saint, what you should expect from that prayer will be usually quite the opposite of what you expect when you go to a Benny Hinn rally. It should be more a child with a disability, or a troubled marriage, or a problem that it's a thorn in the flesh, as Paul noted, because that seems to be what reliably makes saints.
There's that joke around a lot of evangelical churches, which is like, be very careful when you pray for patience, lest sometimes in my church, I help stack the chairs, and whenever they say, like, let's pray for more people to come, I'm like, no, please don't. It's too much. but that's kind of what it is. It's when you pray for good things, often you learn the good things from the bad.
Yeah. I wouldn't underestimate the there's I don't even know what to call it other than just say deep uncertainty that goes with this particular path. It's Jesus, because Jesus is personal, yet he violates our norms at every level, or our expectations of what is normal. And yet what is normal is death. And the more we cling to the expected, the normal, the more certain we will die in our sins. Go to Universalism now, folks. We can have that talk. So faith, we've had this discussion before, Paul, about different, and it's come up again with Ethan recently, is believe versus trust. My beliefs are all over the map on any given day based on God knows what conditions. But I just keep going back to the trust. I go back to the scriptures. I listen to the scriptures. More often I listen. I like to listen more than read, but I do read too. But it's to hear it. And then it's just like, okay, I'll trust this right now. I'll trust, some passage in some parable, some passage of the gospel, something in Paul, and this is something I can lean on in this moment. The big picture, I can't grok. I can go into T-grok country really fast if I try to make it all make sense. But I understand that. I mean, I really, St. Jude says, bless the unbeliever. Don't curse them. Don't attack them. Because it's good reason. There are good reasons not to believe it. The doubter, the doubter. It's good reasons to doubt. Christians who really buy into this, the line out of Jude again about once and for all given to the saints. I'm not sure it means quite what a lot of Christians think, that they've got the whole package once and for all given to the saints. This is they've got the system of belief. This is it. This is what they cling to. And to me, it's like, man, I don't think that's the game we're supposed to play. I think it's got to be much more about trust and then doing what's in front of us.
Someone has a book out there entitled The Sin of Certainty.
There you go.
I love that title.
And Paul's warning in, is it 1 Corinthians 10:12? Don't, if you think you stand, watch out.
Take heed lest you fall. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of separation between belief and trust. That's a very easy way to distinguish the way you feel and the way you act and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. There's another side of that. I think I can't remember his name right now, but he has a book about faith, the Greek word pistis, and he translated allegiance, which is a kind of trust, but it's a more sort of active trust. I'm gonna not only trust this, but I'm gonna follow it. I'm gonna give myself to it. That sort of feeling to it. I really like that one because it involves a more active sense of
Well, there's a fun play on the words belief and trust from belief, and thanks be to the Dutch. I have this knowledge is like a leve, to live. So to belief is kind of a very old Germanic word. It's like to live it, right? And then trust. Trust plays off the word creed, right? I can entrust it to you, credo, to you. I give it to you, but at the same time, credo, the creed, is something that I believe. So there's this kind of loop between the two of them, and one is to live it out, and the other one has the element of both I hold it, but I also give it, I entrust it to you. So kind of can pick away at those ones as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I really like allegiance. I've got to play with that some more in my head. I really like using that word because there's something active about it. But you could get a little militant to it with it too if you're not careful. I could see that going off into a kind of jihadi kind of direction.
That's something I wanted to bring up on the lion and the fox separate. I just started thinking, how does the lion go wrong and how does the fox go wrong? And it seems to me a lion is a despot and a fox is a deceitful person.
Well, a fox, it's been very interesting. Ezra Klein, who is, reliably, let's say, on the left in the American political spectrum, works for the New York Times. He and Derek Thompson, who works for the Atlantic, also reliably on the left, but I think both of them, I'm going to say this and I'm going to get criticized for it. I think both of them pretty intelligent, sharp guys. They've just co-written a book called Abundance. And part of, YouTube right now, Ezra Klein has all sorts of things out where he's basically saying, why haven't the foxes been able to build anything? And actually, that's what the video that I dropped this morning and a little bit of I posted one on Voices Len, and I also made a Substack on this. What Ezra Klein says, the reason they can't resolve the housing crisis of San Francisco is you have all of these communities that aren't really communities, but the foxes are trying to manage these sort of blobbish things like the Black community or the gay community, and they're not really communities. They're just sort of these, he doesn't say it this way, these imaginary entities out in the world. And so you can't build an apartment building in San Francisco to resolve the housing crisis because, you're going to kill some worms, and the worm community is going to be very upset with you. And so there's a paralysis that comes with foxes that I think part of the reason people sort of instinctively, and I think the desire for Trump was deeply instinctive on the part of many people, was that enough of the managerialism, enough of the, we've got to hear everybody in the room, someone make a decision. And that's sort of the lion fox dynamic. But of course, the opposite of that is that the lions, they don't care about who they run over, or who they killed or whose blood they shed. They have a mission to attend to.
Well, Paul, have you thought about what Jesus called Herod? Jesus.
Herod was a fox, right?
Right. Well, and yet we would think of him as very much a lion.
We would.
But Jesus saw him as which makes foxes are a pretty dark figure. In your paradigm.
Yeah.
Well, I think he called him a fox because he was trying to negotiate between his Jewish, sort of semi-Jewish heritage and the Romans. He was trying to, where am I safest kind of thing,
Yep. And Herod was a master at that. The Herods they were political survivors. Herod, in a time when you back the wrong horse in terms of the Caesar horse race, that would mean death. Herod reliably jumps from, Mark Antony to Octavius. That's Herod the Great. And his sons and grandsons, sort of had that same, they were consummate politicians.
Well, even to be a child or grandchild of Herod was to be survivor.
Right, you survived that lottery. No, that's right. Jesus calls him a fox, and he was also another symbol of Herod was the reed, because of course he couldn't put his face on there. Well, what does a reed do? A reed is always bending no matter what the winds say. A lion is like, I'm big and bold and kill me if you can. Sometimes they die.
Yeah.
Except Aslan, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes this so tricky, because that's where Lewis went. But of course, I mean, part of what you have to deal with again in the biblical corpus is you've got Jesus in the gospel, and their followers are begging him. James and John's mom, let my sons be your lieutenants. And Jesus says, can they drink from the cup I'm about to drink? But yet in the book of Revelation, the vision opens with this incredible Christ who has his tongue is a two-edged sword, and he's got the 7 stars in his hand. And I mean, there's the lion. But and Revelation, I can't believe Jordan Peterson's going to play with this book. It's like, oh, Jordan, you have no idea what you're getting into, because you hear the lion and see the lamb, if I have that straight. I mean, the book of Revelation is just an astounding book. But if you're going to be, let's say, a biblical Christian, you've got to deal with the book of Revelation, which means you have to deal with the Old Testament.
Could be touchy, but is Ark possibly a Herodian type of Fox project? Because it is going to Jesus and trying to pull Jesus in and use Jesus to its purposes for a civilizational project that is ultimately about power and influence.
I think, Mark, what's worth considering, and to use the example of Jesus that Paul just outlined there, is you've got the spectrum from the lion to the lamb, and there's different steps and milestones along that path. And like we have now endured, civilizationally, we've been stuck in books and left brain thinking for a long time, right? So we've become more and more structured and regimented, and it's like this is not in a manual, therefore how can I do it, right? And as that has progressed, and I've seen that myself, in various places I've been, where there's a kind of a move towards it's not written down. Where'd you get the authority to do that? And where I'm going with this is that so where am I going with this? Like, imagine the context of a civilization which has become so bounded by social media and other ways of communicating that it has slid from the extreme line of like a Napoleon, or to break all the eggs and to do what you want, and has gone all the way over and become neutered. So what does the path of moving back towards a healthy lion-fox dynamic look like? And I think in the sense that Ark is an attempt to not flip to the extreme, but to try to reassert or reassess what does a post purely fox neutered society look like, if that makes sense.
I don't think Ark knows what it is yet. It's very sort of discombobulated, but it's a forum, and I'm really glad that Jordan and Philip Stroud and the others, have decided to play with it. I'm much more partial to playing with Estuary. And Estuary is deeply fox-like. It's little, it's nimble. You can come into an estuary and pitch anything. And my channel, I'm very fox-like. I tolerate more in the live stream than a lot of channels will, and I like it. But you've got to, in a sense, you've got to sort of be a confident fox if you want to get anything done. And I like, while I'm not a universalist, just so that classist doesn't come after me. No, it's also true I'm not. But there are these tensions in Calvinism around that, Neil, or Len, you of course remember Neil Punt and his biblical universalism, some of the books that he wrote about that, another CRC minister. And, trying to, because the truth is that one of the basic things that the Christian Reformed Church and other Christian traditions say is God is not something that we can finally capture with our paradigms or our systems. And so what that should lead us to is a degree of humility into the systems that we create and enforce on others, where, in the Christian Reformed Church, we were probably way over on one side of what does it mean to be Christian Reformed? Can mean anything. And now we're sort of coming over to the other side. No, we're going to tighten this up and we're going to have it mean some things, and that's going to bring some loss. And so we're, I think, Jeremy, you're right. Jesus works this lion-lamb dichotomy, but that again gets into this really difficult thing of what kind of power does Jesus have? People want to bring Jesus into their anti-Roman or pro-Roman alliance based on the power that they see exhibited in him. But basically, when he shows that he will not be anybody's puppet, well, then, you're way too powerful to leave hanging around here. Let's get rid of you.
Mark, one of the things you said earlier was like you might as well annoy everybody, and I think part of the way that like Jesus works, and especially in answering things, can be very, very annoying to the people who pray for it.
Mm. Yeah. Well, Amanda says here, does doormat Christianity have its place? And the difficulty is that you cannot divorce the crucifixion from the resurrection. In that Good Friday, Jesus looks like a doormat. My God, why are you forsaking me? And Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're due. But at the same time, in Luke, one of the thieves on the cross sees something by attending. And who would say to a man stripped naked, being mocked and brutalized on a cross, receive me into your kingdom? It's like, what kind of kingdom is that? But that's I think why, as Jordan Peterson says of the Christian story, that's why it's an archetypal story. It's a limit case. You can't get around it because, again, that same man then shows up, and as I mentioned before, you would think he would knock on Pilate's door and say, how do you like me now? Or Herod's door, but he doesn't. He doesn't feel the need to press the point in the way that it seemingly all of the Christian apologists wish he would have. And so there we get right into this puzzle of power where you would think that the church that is, emptying hospitals and, healing autism and cancer and bipolar disorder and, all of this thing, that this church would sort of rule the world. But the church hasn't done that, and yet it's still all over the world. How does that work?
But if you talked about the resurrection, if you follow the story along, so if the resurrection were to be an act of power before the world would have known about it. Jesus would have gotten up from the grave and gone to Rome and said, hey, here I am. You thought you got me? No way. He, at most, according to Paul, is 500 people. Okay, I'm going to show myself to 500 people. And he says to them, go and make disciples of the nations. And he already told them what a disciple is, which is to take up your cross and follow me. In that sense, the resurrection is not the power play like we like to think it was. Suddenly I win, but it's But then yes, Paul says it is the new creation. It's what's going to happen, but not now.
Go ahead, Jared.
Can I play on that a small bit?
Yeah, of course.
So, was that not the ultimate lion move, right? Not, and remember, I'm seeing lion as not just being a binary, but as a range of lions, right? You know, you can be a man, or a good man, or a bad man, or whatever, right? There's differentiations in how you can do it. So you can have a lion which, you know, brings everything crashing down, and a lion who, the example that jumped to my mind was the person who set up the National Health Service over in England, right? That was a person who broke the paradigm, who refused to play by the previous rules and transcended and created a new thing. What does, you know, when you say that Jesus doesn't seek to present to the world his display of authority, well, that's what a fox would do, right? A fox would be like, well, now I'm going to invoke subsection 7 to be able to prove to you that you all made the bad call, and I'm actually, I was the guy you should have hired, right? But a lion has already gone. A lion doesn't care to play the games of the to follow those rules, and in a sense, you know, that's lion behavior, right? So you know, it's playing.
It's so interesting how Jesus, you know, and so many of the stories. I was just watching Ross Douthat was doing yet another thing about his book, and he made the observation that you know, part of what has shifted in our culture is people are more upset if their son or daughter marries someone of the different political party than, let's say, someone of a different religion, which just shows sort of the valence of these identities and these characteristics right now. Jesus, you know, one of the observations I made a number of years ago was I was reading through the book of Acts because I was preaching on the book of Acts. It's one of the lovely things about being a preacher is a number of years ago, I decided I was going to, when I preach series, I'm going to stick to one book for the most part, because you can get a sense of the author and where that book is going. And you see Paul of Tarsus holding the coats of those stoning Stephen, and the heavens open. And Luke portrays Stephen. And if you compare like Acts and Luke and Stephen and Jesus, Luke recycles a lot of the Jesus language on Stephen, which is an amazing thing. And the heavens open, and Stephen has a vision, and of course he's killed, and Paul's sitting there. And then you've got the road to Damascus where the heavens open again. And it's like, hey, Jesus, while you had the heavens open, and, you know, if you could have just turned your gaze, you know, a degree or two to the left, why didn't you talk to the Paul guy then? Because all these people that he persecuted from between Stephen and Damascus, I'm sure their families would have really liked a little let up from the, you know, the Saul of Tarsus persecution, but you wait. And that gets into, again, this, I love that story that you told, Len, because the Holocaust is this sacred moment of the 20th century where, and I think Jordan Peterson has it right, when we go to Auschwitz, we shouldn't be, oh, those Germans are such horrible people. We should much more be affected by the idea that if I were a German and needed a job or was drafted into the army, would I have felt it fortunate to be in Auschwitz Guard instead of over on the Eastern Front? What would I have done given those circumstances? And so
there, but the grace of God go I.
That's right. And so you begin to see this look into reality of the power of God, that God, this is part of the reason I'm a Calvinist, God chooses to call Paul on the road to Damascus, and not while conveniently the gates of heaven are open and he can just, oh, Stephen, yeah, you're coming up, buddy. And by the way, Paul, you're on the wrong track. You're kicking against the goads. And so, but God works through these things somehow, and I believe reveals his glory. But how that relates to what we call power or causality, I don't know.
But Paul wouldn't have been Paul if he called him earlier.
Exactly. He's God used his rebellion to make exactly the tool he wanted from him. And Paul, a very, flawed tool in many respects. I often think, Mark, when I read different letters of Paul, that he's a little bipolar, because he walks into a town and he blows it up. He's so enthusiastic. And the next letter you get from him, he's like, all have abandoned me, and Lord, take away the thorn and the, the guy swings.
He's a fellow crazy man. Absolutely. I love Paul for that reason.
Hey, Jimmy, I'll give you a call right back.
One of the things that sort of, the way that we kind of see God working always sort of happens at the end of it, right? Like you kind of never know what the heck's going on. And so with Paul, like, it's like, why not before the road to Damascus rather than then, or like, and in Genesis, with Joseph, I think it was like, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And it's like, all of that only happens at the end. And it's always a little bit of a mystery why God chooses to work in those particular ways. But
we can also
usually
just take the Job view of how dare you question why God does something.
I tend to see it as, at the end of it, whenever I see how things turned out, I always kind of go, I'm very happy with the way that I'm very satisfied with those things, right? Like at least in my life, I can't, not speaking about like, oh boy, all those Jews that Paul persecuted died. I'm very happy about that. It's like in my particular life, the ways that things have gone wrong and God has used them for good. I always kind of think, after looking at it retrospectively, after seeing the way that it all plays out, I go, yeah, that was probably for the best, right, that way. And so it's because of that I have the trust that when things aren't going well, or when I can't see why God is choosing to use his power in the way that he is, I have that trust, that allegiance, which I don't actually think works in this sentence, that to the idea that God is using it for good, and that whatever happens when we see it in the other side, it'll be like, more glory to God for all that.
There's a nice play then on that story, Elliot, that was just discussed about Saul of Tarsus and Paul, and what you've just mentioned, because Saul of Tarsus was the camp guard, right? Saul of Tarsus made his choice. He had a clear agenda. He was doing it for that purpose, and at some point he had to flip. And it's nice to then think that, so for all of our false challenges and problems, that at least we haven't yet fallen to the same level as Saul of Tarsus, but could instead perhaps somewhat grandiosely rise to the same level of, that does seem a bit aspirational, of the Apostle Paul, right? So he's got the bottom and the height, right? It's a lovely counterexample.
Yeah.
Here's a Calvinist word. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, I think one of the really interesting things you mentioned in that bit there, Jer, was he made the decision. And I think one of the things we were speaking about earlier was sort of like this make a decision thing. And Mark, you mentioned it was like, you have to be very careful when you make these decisions, because, you never know what sort of influences and sort of what kind of, things are happening up in here that influence those decisions. And I think sort of maybe looking at Paul's and Saul's story is that he made those decisions, and, and even whether in spite of or through or somehow both of those things, God still manages to work things out together. And maybe those are sort of, it's kind of a wishy-washy kind of guardrail, because again, you kind of only know about that at the end. But like, we can have some kind of trust and allegiance in the idea that God is the guardrails against our own inhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just the one thing I'm wondering about is the word elect. I've been playing with that a lot in my mind lately, and it's a very Calvinist word. I like that word.
Mm.
But I don't, I more and more tend, it's not the elect, and it probably has something to do with what Jesus talked about as narrow is the way and wide is the path to destruction, and few find it, and so on. And the elect, how are the elect made? And Paul, I look at Paul, and he's so all in when he does make whenever, I mean, listen, we see him. He makes his conversion, and he is all in. I think that's what the elect look like. Stephen is the elect in that moment. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, imitating Jesus. And then the third elect kind of person I see in Scripture would be like the criminal on the cross beside Jesus. When you come into your kingdom, bring me along. Receive me too. And I think it's the people who've come to a point with that criminal. He's at, the only reason he could see it was that he everything else in this world he'd given up. It's nothing left. Now he can see it. Stephen, he's taken hits from rocks. His death is imminent. He can see it. Paul, somehow he had it. Had something of a lifetime after it, but all the time kind of seeing it. That's what the elect looks like. And it's that complete emptying of a self. That's what it is to be elect, I think. I don't think it's necessarily about the who's saved and who's not saved and all that business. I think it's much more tricky.
Let me push back a little bit on the elect thing. Basically, I think you're right, but I think the elect are those who God calls to somehow work toward what God wants to do in the world. But the elect aren't. It's not just the moments when they're doing the right thing. They're elect when they're doing the wrong thing, like Abraham, David, and all the rest of them were screwed up mightily in lots of different ways, and yet they were also the elect.
I'm just wondering if it's to be the elect is what you aspire to be, or is it to be unlucky? I mean, it's to be cursed as much as it is to be blessed.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's like you've been selected to undergo a radical perspectival shift, and particularly in the case of Paul, it's so radical that he ends up. What the perspectival shift is, excuse my French, but putting him on his ass on the ground, right? So he has to look up. It changes his dimension, and now he goes solely to the vertical, right?
It ain't necessarily going to be fun.
Yeah,
if you think about Paul's life coach, be like, things are going pretty good with the whole persecuting Christian thing. You had a solid group there. This new strategy, you're going to go into these towns and you're going to preach that Jesus, and then what are they going to do to you then? Well, and then you just becoming a Christian was a terrible life strategy for Saul.
Blew up his dream board.
That's right.
But the other thing is Paul was deeply committed to God and to God's way in the world. I mean, he would, a fist pounding preacher of a Pharisee. He was deeply committed to God. Nobody would question that.
So then the question is does God make a difference? Does God make a difference? Because in Saul's case, he was the commitment to God is there really a difference between Saul and Paul before the encounter and after the encounter? I mean, there's obviously a difference, but in terms of his commitment, is there a difference?
He was still zealous.
He's still the whipsaw for the Jewish people at that time was God had radically changed course, evidently, and that was pretty hard to catch up with, and I can understand that.
Because I mean, I go to a Church of Christ, and it's very, very Arminian and very much about a commitment, make that commitment to Christ and get the baptism and get saved. You got to get saved, and I'm not the decision. Paul had made his decision long before he ran into Jesus on the road to Damascus. It's not him who saved himself from himself. I mean, he had made his decision for God early in life, it sounds like, and was going straight to hell with it. I don't know. That may be too theologically problematic. I'm not sure if I see Paul cringing.
No. I'm looking at the clock, and so I'm gonna start the. We're gonna land the plane here, and then I'm gonna drop the link, which will let in a bunch of lions who don't like the lion fox thing. So takeaways from today's discussion. What did today's estuary conversation mean to you? What did you get out of it?
One, I'm thinking of changing one little viewpoint, and it has come down to the trust and belief thing. I used to always sort of state my, faith of why do you believe? Well, I just choose to believe. Well, now I think I might be switching the answer to why do you believe? Well, I trust in God.
All right, good.
I guess my takeaway is I'm just really happy to meet all you guys. It's always fun to meet people from all over. The Netherlands, an Irish guy in the Netherlands, and people have gone through different experiences in different churches. It's just marvelous. I appreciate it.
Len, I gotta get you. I gotta find ways to bring you along on some of my things, because my trips to Europe and my estuary work all over the U.S. and Canada. This is exactly what it's like, and this is. Yeah. I often think, of course, Len knew my father a little bit, at least. If my father were alive today, he would have loved this. This was. Yeah. This was so my father, just meeting all the different people. And, I'm watching the live chat go through, and we've got Secular Quranism, and we've got Mark Lefevre, and we've got Sherry, and we've got how many different crazy voices in the thing. But I enjoy it.
My little thing is at the end would be this. I agree with Leonard. This is a great group, and I've been on several of these, and I was reticent to jump in, but it was so quiet on the sign-up board. I thought, well, I'd throw my name in. I told Paul in an email, boot me if you got a lot of people interested. But at the end, because I just was so empty, and this is, you guys need to jump in, because this is, so none of the people I knew before. I met Jer before, but briefly on a couple live streams. But this is an exceptional group.
Yeah. And Elliot, great that you could come on. Elliot and I are going to have a conversation soon, and I'm really looking forward to having Elliot share his story. It was so much fun to get to meet Elliot at ARC, and that was so cool. It was so much fun to meet Jer in the Van Os compound in the Netherlands, which I love that Van Os family. I'm going to do it Friday, or I'm going to do an estuary group with Voss and his sons. Might bring in Van Donk and Job too, but the Dutchmen, those Dutchmen, they're something else. They really are.
I'm not.
Can I ask you a question, Paul?
Yeah.
What went wrong with the Dutch? Are such wonderful people. What the hell went wrong when we went to Africa? I'm just curious. How did that happen? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, there's a guy in the comments, Tyler. Tyler was in the Christian Reformed Church in North America. He's currently in South Africa. He was in campus ministry. Yeah, the Dutchmen are very interesting people. They got it, and the Frisians, because look at the Frisians and the Dutch, and my Jewish ancestors, they found a place there. The Dutch are very interesting. They're really quite an amazing people, but they got a stubborn streak. I mean, if you're going to live between England, Germany, and France, and the deep blue sea, and carve out your living there, you got to have a stubborn side.
They're remarkable. I've never met. I didn't know any Dutchmen until I met you, I don't think. And then I've started meeting a bunch, and it's great people.
Yeah. All right, I've dropped the link, so if anybody else wants to come in, you can come in. So, and any of you who are currently on the screen can leave when you have to. That's fine, and maybe nobody will come in today. I mean, it's as Mark said, it was kind of an interesting day in that I dropped the link in a few places to join this group, and it's like hardly anybody picked it up. So this morning I had to scramble a little bit and make sure that the wedding banquet would be filled here. And but I agree with the group. I'm super delighted at this mix. This mix was really good, and it's always fun to me to see what mixes. Again, if Len, you should really think about, especially given everything. Are you at COS right now? Are you working in another church?
Yeah, I'm still at interim at COS for another few months, I hope.
Okay. You know, I would think, given everything that poor COS has to go through right now, with everything going on in the denomination, if you guys had an every week estuary group at COS, I think a group of people in your church would find that to be such a blessing. I've been doing every week estuary groups at Living Stones. I have some people that don't stay for church at all and never go to church, and I have other people from the church and some sort of in between. And it's just the quality of the conversation, the honesty, the depth, the openness. It's such, I don't think I would work in a church without an estuary group, just because it's like what we experience today, especially if you can sort of bring in people who don't necessarily go to church, so that the two groups can really sort of get to know each other. It's wonderful.
No, I look forward to doing that maybe this coming fall when things quiet down a little bit.
Yeah. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine. Say.
Well, I was listening to you guys, a very interesting conversation. I don't know exactly what to emphasize, because there were so many good topics. But as far as the lion and the fox, well, isn't human behavior complex? Aren't we all imperfect? Aren't we all flawed? Aren't we all full of strengths and weaknesses? And the way I see it is, when I saw it the most, like right on my face, like where I couldn't ignore it, is when I became a parent, and when I had to teach my kids something, and they didn't want to, they just didn't want to take my advice, or they didn't want to do the thing. And it's like, why should I do chores? Why should I do homework? Why should I do this? And there begins the struggle of, I want to persuade, I want to change their habit, their behavior, the way they see things, the way they plan things, the way they wish things. And it's all like, and how, which is the best way, and what worked for one kid didn't work for the other kid. And there began my struggle and my yearning to delve deeper into two aspects. The human behavior, the psychology, and two, what does it mean to be a Christian? Because that also is just as perplexing as trying to raise kids and try to understand the concept of, like, how do I change them?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great, I love that, Alex, because being a parent, you go from lion to fox. I mean, when they're a toddler, it's like, you're going to go to bed. It's just parental lioning. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then they become teenagers and young adults. And it's like, you're very much in fox mode, because there's not a lot of lion moves you can make anymore. And if you make a lion move, sometimes it'll turn out really poorly. So it's, I love taking parenting and putting that into the fox lion dynamic. It's really helpful.
Did you say, Alex, how do I change them?
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, believe it or not, I mean, it sounds hard, but as a parent, what I want is, so this is, I'm going to try to explain what I meant, because I know it sounds really harsh. And I had a rough childhood. I didn't have, but anyways, I don't want to change the conversation, but yes, I do want my kids to be as productive and as kind and loving, and with a good work ethic, and yearning for knowledge, and to better themselves, to be good Christians, and to, well, who is Christ, right? To learn the scriptures, to want to know the scriptures, all that. I mean, how can I not say I want to change them into that? The $1 million question is, how is the best approach? Because that's what I would desire. Now, reality in my wants and my plans and my desires are two different things.
Yeah, I don't think I have two adult children now, both in their 20s, middle 20s. I honestly don't think that thought ever crossed my mind once. That I've ever thought about how do I change them. It was always been more. I guess if I had a metaphor, it'd be more like maintaining a house plant.
Are you talking
you got to
about
water
changing?
them and feed them and kind of not let them take over the house. You know, what I mean,
Are you talking about changing them or just changing some of their behaviors?
Both. So, and let me add a little bit of context. So, I had a very rough childhood, and it was both the environment that I was in, and both my parents. And another component was my ignorance, my rebellious spirit. And when God stopped me in my tracks, and I stopped rebelling, and I finally gave in, it changed my trajectory, and it created a deep yearning for to understand the why, the how come, and he put me because it was none of my. I don't want to take the credit because it's not anything I did, but he put me in a place where that desire only grew. Because I've been working in a lockdown psychiatric facility for it's going to be 7 years in June-ish, and that created. I mean, that just created the yearning went from this big to humongous, and I couldn't stop myself from devouring textbooks about clinical psychology, human behavior, and all the textbooks that. Remember, I'm rubbing elbows with professionals that teach this stuff, and I'm like picking the brain. What textbooks did you guys read, and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think I'm even halfway there, and that yearning has not gone away. But I do really mean it when I say I really want to change my kids into a better version of whatever that could be. I just don't know what is the best strategy because it's human beings.
When you
We're
find out,
unique.
please tell me. I have a 13, 11, and 9-year-old.
I have 5 kids between the age of 33 and 25, and it's a subtle. Parenting is one of the most challenging, demanding, rewarding, frustrating, soul-trying things you will ever do, but it is a blessing. And Alex, lots of prayer.
Well, also my relationship with my wife.
Yeah, well, there's another one.
That is a challenge in itself, right? It's like, okay, today I'm going to try to do my very best to not make her upset or to not do something dumb.
Good
That's
luck
a
with
tall
that.
order.
Yeah, you got a bunch of old guys here that are like, "Oh, Alex, we're feeling you, man."
Alex, let me give you a little nightmare story because I went through a divorce over the last 4 years. My divorce happened this way. I had decided to start going back to church regularly again. Well, to do that, I was going to try motivate my kids and my wife to come with me by saying, yeah, we'll go for breakfast after church if you go with me. So we're sitting at the dinner table Saturday night, and my daughter asked me, are we going to breakfast tomorrow morning? I said, well, I'm going back to church. If you guys go with me, whoever goes with me, we'll go for breakfast. My wife, right at that table, says, you continue with this. I'm going to do what I've been threatening to do. I said, I'm not going to try to stop you. She right at that table says, kids, we're getting a divorce. Who do you want to live with? My kids, she got lucky and got custody of the kids originally, primary custody during temporary. She's alienated me so bad, I got primary custody of the kids back. My kids would not say good night to me or good morning for a year solid.
Wow.
Now they don't argue about going to church. They go with me. They have completely turned around. They are like my kids again, but it can be rough. And now it's like, now my current one is trying to get my daughter to learn her catechism enough for confirmation, which she has coming up in May. So, but it's I feel for you. It's hard.
Wow. Thank you, Dale. Nathan, what say you?
Hello. I'm here to bring the positivity as usual. I just always feel like very frustrated listening to these conversations because I kind of don't understand like what people's goals are. Like, you know, it often feels like what people are trying to do is touch on a lot of topics that tie together complicated questions in various fields, right? But then it's kind of like all turns are out to be various random like metaphors and things like that. And personally, I just like really struggle to know like why I'd want to do that or like what value I would get out of it. Like, for example, if I wanted to study foxes or mammals of some kind, right? Like I might want to read some textbook on their mating behavior or something, but I wouldn't want to like read some metaphor about animals into like my personality or something. I don't know, like I kind of see that a little bit like what's your spirit animal or something. I don't know, like I just don't get something out of it. And so I find these conversations just frustrating from my point of view because I don't get what's like going on, because it's not the same as just an academic conversation about those topics, but it's like something else. So that's my sort of confusion and frustrating. I have read Metaphors We Live By to Matthew. Like I agree the sciences are replete with metaphor, by the way.
Could I take a shot?
Go for it.
You're an excellent conversation partner, Nathan. I mean, I really enjoy the time that you come and we because we talk and I think you present challenges to my practice that need to be challenged. And I've thought a lot about. You've made this point before, and I think it's I've thought about it some, and I think a lot of it. It's the point of sadhana or practice in Buddhism and yoga that you perform all these moves that have no point. You perform the practice. You repeat the mantra. You're orienting your mind in a safe space, so to speak, or in a studio, or in your home, or in a church, to habituate your mind and body in a direction, so that when you get into the world, you can conduct yourself skillfully and with intent. The mush, this process it's just in an estuary that just looks kind of chaotic. It's a place of it's a dojo. It's a place of where you practice, but it's not quite the same as practicing in the real world or living out your life in the real world. But if you don't orient your mind and direct your mind in a way that is skillful, the world will direct it for you.
And can I
having this conversation here? Sorry, one last thought. Having the conversation here, for example, talking about your marriage experience or your child rearing experience, and the back and forth trading of ideas. And then, of course, we go off into tangents and we never get back to it again. But he'll then go back somewhat changed, maybe not even in a way that he quite knows, but go back and re-engage with his kids again, or re-engage with your spouse again, and do it in a slightly different way, just because of this, of the moment of the practice.
And just before you respond on that, Nathan, can I just augment what Mark is saying with a story? So that there was an Irish philosopher, John Moriarty, and he lived out in the west of Ireland, and he was walking in a mountainy area, and he saw a heather, and he saw a hare sitting in the grass. And if anybody knows hares tend to bed down in high grass, and they make a little kind of a little almost like a nest where they sit. And the hare will sit very still, and then at the last moment it will run at high speed, and it's just like this moment that bursts into your view, and it's gone. And how he sought to participate in that whole experience of the hare was he walked up to the place where the hare had its sit, and he put his head down onto the ground, and he felt the warmth of the hare upon the grass. And I have to think that of all the people who've probably ever seen hares, the amount of people who have done that must be very, very small. But he's seeking a radically different perspective on what it means to be, and he doesn't know where it's going to lead him. And I think that's what these conversations, at least offer me, right? If I can give the perspective, it's like what Mark was, saying. It's you're seeing a different way of things. You're coming back from a different position than you had gotten into. And there's no way you could draw the line from A, B, C. You go from A to the Z dimension and back again, right? At least that's my personal experience. I think that was trying to build on what you were saying, Mark.
I'll comment too about my experience with people, and one of the things that you do as a pastor, and this is where sort of therapists, Freud and Jung talked about the talking therapy. One of the things you do as a pastor is you listen to people talk a lot and a long time. And as a pastor, often on one hand, you can look at somebody, you get to know somebody, and you don't just get to know them as an individual, you get to know them within their family context. And you listen to all the rest of the family complain, let's say, about one person in the family. And so on one level, it would seem very easy to say to a person, what your problem is? You're selfish. Or what your problem is? You drink, or you're spending money on lottery tickets, or you never clean up your room. Because in terms of human beings living together and their specific miseries, there's a level in which the malady is obvious, or at least obvious to many. But you would think, well, why hasn't anybody told them that the reason their family is furious at them is that they're a slob? And the answer to that is they've been told that 1,000 times. In fact, that's the only thing they ever hear from their family members, that they're a slob. So then you sit down with that slob and you listen. And you listen and listen and listen. And they talk about things that have absolutely nothing to do with their housekeeping. They talk and they talk and they talk and they talk. And you listen and you listen and you listen and you say, what would you like me to pray for? And the things that they want prayed for have nothing to do with their housekeeping. But you do that over a long enough period of time, and you start hearing back that, well, he's still a slob, but he's a little easier to live with. Oh. And it's a really funny thing about human beings and this talking thing that we do. We, I think, imagine that directness will achieve an outcome. And every now and then it does, or we wouldn't bother trying anyway. But more often than not, it's the indirectness. And this is what it sort of parallels up with sort of the believing, trusting, allegiance thing we're talking about in the time, that there's a lot of mystery to us in this thing that we call language. And I know, Nathan, you've done a lot of thought about the relationship between us and language. But in my experience and the experience of psychologists and pastors and mothers and village elders over thousands of years have been sometimes, not always,
sometimes it's helpful to just do a lot of listening and have people talk, because one way or another, it somehow seems to make things better. And that's kind of the weird thing about Estuary, because I go into Sunday morning into an Estuary group and I have no idea what we're going to talk about. And of course, it sort of frustrates church people if Jesus never comes up on the conversation or all of this stuff. But what I do know is that people are coming every week because when they leave Estuary, the world feels a little brighter. They feel a little wiser. They have a little bit more energy to love one another and a little bit more patience with one another. And that's a tangible, measurable gain that Estuary seems to be delivering to them. Now, if you ask me how it works in a very cause and effect sort of way, I really can't answer that question. But I know in a cause and effect sort of way that there are reliable, good outcomes to it. And so even though as a pastor, I do a tremendous amount of listening, I do that as a husband and as a father and as a neighbor, I do it all over my life. And listening is really costly. I don't know what kind of ringtones you have, Mark. But I've, that's why I do this. And I know a lot of people lose patience with me because they say, he spends time with people who aren't worth spending time with. But yet I tolerate the people with that complaint. And like in Sunday sermon, that's a complaint that was thrown at Jesus all the time. You're spending time and receiving and paying attention to all the wrong people. And I think, well, maybe Jesus knew something. And so I can't answer your question, but I can tell you from experience that time, attention, love, listening, care, giving people an opportunity to talk, it often does kind of amazing things.
One of the things that I discovered is that one of the reasons why, when I was younger and rebellious, why I was stuck in a deep, dark place and my life didn't get better, it got worse and worse and worse. It was because, well, I'll summarize. I didn't want to listen to anybody else. And it dawned on me eventually, by the grace of God, that anything new that I was going to learn ever has to come from outside myself. Because if I knew it, anything new has to come from outside myself, via books, via talking to people, listening to people, and in that learning from others, I began to see myself, because there's so many things that we, for some strange reason, the obvious to everybody else is not obvious to us. It's like we got tunnel vision, we got blind spots, we got, I don't know, 1,000,001 reasons why we ignore the elephant in the room. But sometimes when somebody else is going through something similar, we see it, and then it finally dawns on us. I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing. Or, whoa, perhaps I need this new strategy. But if I was going to learn a new language, it has to come from someone other than me. And even a book, they say, well, I'll just pick a book. That book was written by somebody else. That's not me. But anyways, I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, there are quite a few different things that people said there. One of them that the thing that I agree with is that I can see value in talking to people in this way. If of course not everyone is going to turn up to a conversation in a place where they're like an expert in that field, or where everything that they have to say is true, and where they can't get some kind of value or something out of having an interaction. I definitely, think that those aims are good aims to have. There is one criticism that is definitely not where I'm coming from. The idea that, I might think that people are talking with the wrong people. I think everyone is worth spending time with and talking to. I think what I'm questioning is whether or not some ways of engaging with people, particularly if they might be in, they might be in a place where they have like confused ideas about things and stuff, whether some ways of engaging with people are going to be worse than others in terms of the types of outcomes that they lead to. That's my concern. So then in terms of if people are engaging with things like history or science or psychology, right? If people are doing that in ways that are unclear or bad, according to me, of course, this is like, and I keep kind of cash that out. The problem is that people can find themselves basically justifying like bad values or advice that they might have based off of like a misunderstanding of certain things. So I think you'd see it maybe more easily in someone who might be like in the out group. So if you watch like an atheist stream, right, you might see a bunch of atheists talking about why some action that you might disagree with morally, like maybe like a sexual choice or getting divorced or something, was justified because it's in their genes or evolution selected for it. And essentially what they're doing there is they're kind of fleshing out their explanation, justifying why they like would advise the thing that they'd advise for someone based off of some kind of loosely held background beliefs. Now, have they actually done some kind of like genetic analysis there of this person to identify they have a gene and causally identified that there is this gene that's responsible for something? No, right? Most of the time they're just kind of speculating. And I think that this is the problem when people try to appeal to certain entities in explanatory frameworks where they're not engaging like critically with those things, is that often they're just kind of like justifying whatever they want to believe, but kind of it sounds more plausible because they've said a bunch of stuff. And I definitely agree with Jaz's point about different perspectives being important. I just maybe I see like more of a homogenized set of opinions typically though in this space that I do in other spaces, and that like there is some disagreement, but you can usually predict with quite some accuracy what someone will think about like Jordan Peterson or Christianity or something like that, right? And it's because there is definitely like it's not like this is a group centered around like pluralism or something particularly, but centered kind of around like Christian attitudes towards things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I just don't know that it's like definitely giving that, if that makes sense.
I think that's very much dependent on like if you go into your local pub, right? Your local pub will have a certain flavor, and within that you'll have wonderful, rich conversations, but all within the context of the one aspect, and just to build on that theme, and to tie in what Alex was saying, the barkeeper, knows you, and the barkeeper also knows your type, right? So he can, if it's a high trade bar, he'll have seen, he'll be able to categorize us broadly, very quickly. He'll know who's causing trouble. He'll know who's going to get drunk after the fifth one. He's know who's just going to be a quiet drinker in the corner. So in that sense, there's a dimension to us and how we're interacting, which naturally outflows from the fact that we're going to this bar, which is our local, but at the same time, we're also readable. And if we were able to access that barman for an open opinion, then he might be like, you're an angry drunk, or you sit there and you don't talk to anybody, so that it gives us that opportunity to have that. So so we're talking to the bar. Paul, would you be the barkeeper? We're talking to the barkeeper, right? But we have come to our local, so naturally enough we're of that nature, right? But I would caution, like, I mean, I suspect I have a lot of overlap with Mark in how I came to this, because I would have also practiced Buddhism for a long time. And as I said to Paul when we were in Holland, I haven't read the New Testament. right? So, I've read more Jordan Peterson than I've read the New Testament. So, in that sense, I'm a total, I don't fit in very well to some of the squares, but I'm still in the bar, right? This is still my local, but I'm over in that corner of the bar, right? I think church is the same way, and I think society is the same way as well.
Yeah. A lot of people. Go ahead.
No, I just with regard to just what is productive and unproductive or predictably beneficial action or whatever, of all the things I've ever learned how to do in my life, that's the most important thing I've done. Period. Maybe even more important than even the person I chose to marry me and being a parent. Everything more important is I learned how to do something that a lot of people dismiss as a waste of time. I learned how to sit in meditation. Probably more important. It's most. I've got countless hours. I've lost count of how many hours I've spent sitting, learning how not to act on my thoughts. And I've probably thousands of hours under my belt at this point. And yet most people, a lot of people anyway, a lot of Americans I know would say that's what a waste of time that was. Probably, but more, it shaped everything else. It saved, I could argue it saved me from a shortened lifespan. Okay. That one thing.
It's funny, Dave Busatil is he describes the corner as a bar and me as the bartender, or the corner as an amateur a stand-up comic. Basically you can get a mic and you can be on stage at Paul Vanderklay's joint, and that's true, and I like that, and I love your illustration, and so then not only just as this little corner thing that I help participate in, and as a church, it's very common to have people say to me things like, I don't know why I come here. Probably I don't even know if I should be coming here, but I still find myself coming here, and I don't know why, but I think it's okay. And my answer to them is, just keep coming if you feel it's okay. If you do something that I think is a problem, I'll tell you. But I'm glad you're here. Reminds me of, there's this old TV show, Cheers. You want to go where everybody knows your name. And again, I think with human beings, it's really strange with us, but we need to belong. And sometimes we need to belong in spaces where there's a little bit of conflict and we don't quite know why we're there, but there we are.
If I may add something as well, I kind of think like a good chunk of at least why I'm very invested in this kind of space or engaging in I'm very new to actually talking around here, but
he's watching the show. Sorry.
No worries. But part of why I enjoy this, and I sort of engage in conversation. So, not just on like a YouTube channel. I try to go and talk to people outside and elsewhere. And I think what I've found is that, there's that idea that like all people are interesting. I think Jordan Peterson said that or something. And so, but I really think that that's true. And like, I can come into a place like this, 6 people who I haven't really ever spoken to in my life, and I have no clue where it'll go. But then, things that people say are interesting, and are they always necessarily true or reliable, or all sorts of the things that we want to have assurance for, so that the things that sort of come into our minds are acceptable in some way? Probably not, but it's also, there's the aspect of it where you just get to engage with people, and that's just really what I enjoy doing. And so whether it's here, whether it's outside in like a pub somewhere, or going to like the random, I don't know, university society thing that I occasionally attend, like it's always fun. And so yeah.
There's something that I want to say for what it's worth. Whenever I go to work, I do 12-hour shifts, So I'm stuck. It's a lockdown facility. So I'm there with a lot of people. And well, let's just say that it's a it's never the same day. It's kind of like the river that you cross. You never cross the same river. And um, very interesting conversations, from delusional to conspiratorial to bouts of wanting attention to genuine, oh man, I'm so broken. How can you guys best help us, right? And the one thing that I will know is that when it comes to people, I do recognize one thing is that I, whether I know it or not, whether I like it or not, can be influenced by others. And in turn, I can influence others. But with that being said, I should be able to decide just how much I let that happen. And I'll give you, and I'm going to make this brief. So I'll give you a metaphor as, so remember the last time you were in a car, you had the radio, you had knobs for the volume and to play, to change the settings, whether you wanted a USB, Wi-Fi, or a radio station, AM or FM. And then you also have other knobs to control the temperature, how to cool. So that's a metaphor for what we cannot see, our internal, call it the soul, the heart, the mind, all of that, our inner being. And the one thing that I have come to understand, and I could be wrong, but what I've come to understand that those are internal knobs that could be adjusted, right? The volume can go up or down as far as my thoughts. They can, right? Hot, cold, all that kind of stuff. My internal peace or internal turmoil could be adjusted by me, but also by others. If I'm standing in front of a very antagonistic person that has a antisocial personality and all they want to do is make me blow a gasket, I got to find ways to not let them change my inner buttons. They're going to try to change my settings, and I'm going to say, nope. First of all, you don't get to change my settings. These are like, you're in my car. Nope, don't change the station. That's my car. Right? But internally, it's like I guard my settings. Like this is they're tuned where I want them, but it's easier said than done to not let somebody else mess with my internal settings, and to also not let myself mess with my internal settings, because I could be like be stuck in a rumination of this. Oh, I could have said this. I should have, would have, all that whole concept. So it's true that in a sense, it's kind of a drag to be around seeing people that you're like, oh, you're just like me. I'm not going to learn anything from you. There's no friction here. There's no weird idea. But at the same time, the opposite could be just as, whoa, that's too out there. And not only that, you want to push that down my throat, that kind of thing. So people, we're very complicated, but we also have to be careful and or understand the fact that both we're being influenced and two, that we can influence.
Yeah, I love that. I love that speech, Alex. That's great. I love anybody who works a job like you do. Boy, you'll learn a lot about people by being in a locked facility for 12 hours on a shift. You'll learn a lot about people. One of the things, Nathan, that your question sort of prompts me and your challenge sort of prompts me. I remember when I was, obviously I grew up in a Christian home and we went to church and that was part of the program. But then I went to college. And at college, I could decide, go to church, not go to church, do whatever I want with my time. We didn't have the internet when I was in college, so I didn't have that thing. We didn't have video games either. I didn't have any of those things. So one of the things I decided I would do really kind of on my own for the first time was read the New Testament, and especially read the Gospels. And my reaction to the Gospels is kind of similar to a lot of the critique and objections that you've been raising here, because, obviously having grown up in Christianity, I had an idea of what this Christianity was. And then I started reading the Gospels and I thought, this book is weird. all they're doing is fighting about who can be healed on the Sabbath and what they can eat and what they can't eat and whether Jesus is following the rules. And so much of the Gospels is just, all of this bickering about things that I look around in the world and say, nobody's fighting about what you can or can't do on the Sabbath, except in the Christian Reformed Church in the 60s and 70s. Nobody's fighting about, whether you should heal in church or not. I mean, we'd just be happy to have something of seeming substance happen in church, to have a lame person walk or someone blind be able to see. That would be an awesome day. I don't know what's wrong with these Pharisees. So, but it's interesting because I've been reading this book my whole life now. And now as I sort of learn it, it's like what had seemed meaningless, now suddenly I'm beginning to understand. And a lot of that for me has been in almost every society before our own, people valued old people. And the reason they valued old people was, well, first of all, they managed to survive. And second of all, maybe as they survived, they learned a thing or two. And that by no means means that all old people are wise or smart or should be listened to. But one of the things that if you do attend enough in life and do pay attention enough in life is that you'll learn some things. And so actually what I really enjoy are old people who are still paying attention. One of those guys is Len Van der Zee. And Len Van der Zee is, poor Len and his side of the Christian Reformed Church, they're having a world of trouble right now. But I really respect and admire and love Len Van der Zee because Len Van der Zee now, I don't know how old Len is. He's in his upper 70s now, I think. He, as a guy who's very well read, very successful in life as a minister in his little corner of the world, still is someone who is open and listens and learns. And so to me, one of the things that I've learned over life is you're never quite sure who you're going to learn from because people will surprise you. And I think that's even true in a locked psych ward because I spend a fair amount of time with unmedicated schizophrenics and people suffering from bipolar and all kinds of things on the street. And often I'll sit down to them and you can listen to a schizophrenic for a long time and not make any sense of anything. But every now and then they'll say something and it's like, that's really brilliant. And that sort of goes back to what Elliot was saying that Jordan Peterson observed, that people are amazing. And if you actually attend to them, you'll be surprised what you can learn. But I think that gets back to Alex's point about we do have to steward our knobs. And part of our stewarding our knobs is like this gate that we have of what do I let in and what do I keep out? And it's really super interesting.
I don't know if knobs has the same connotation in American English as British English, but we do have to steward our knobs. So got
control.
It's past viewership in Britain.
That's hilarious. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
wrap
go
it
ahead,
up. Oh, sorry.
I will, but go ahead.
Okay, very quickly. So, Alex, you had read an awful lot of books. As you went into that work, you started to expand your knowledge, right? And the more books you read, the deeper your read knowledge would have become. But probably all would have felt insufficient the first time you were faced with a very confrontational situation with a patient who began to adjust your dials in a way up and down that no matter how you had read it, no matter how you had researched it, the sense of what that meant it was totally alien to you, and you had to swim and try to figure out how to process that on your own. And the Zen tradition has it talks about an unwritten transmission of knowledge. And I think that part of what we're doing here is exploring the idea that there is an unwritten transmission, because there's no way I could write down or explain what conversation and learning to speak has done for me in a dry way, sure, but in a way that conveys the unspoken, which is an irony when you're talking about speaking, but the unspoken enrichment it has given me. I can't get it across, but I can show other people. I can, not in this forum, I don't mean here, but I mean like in other things, where I practice public speaking with people. And that's an unwritten transmission, and I don't know how to document it, and nobody believed me if I could, right? But sharing it together is the way of transmission.
That's good. That's beautiful. Well, thank you all who participated, and I thought it was a great Estuary session, and this other after Estuary conversation was also great. Really helpful questions, Nathan, and thank you for jumping on, and thank you, Alex, for coming on and sharing. And it's people are amazing, and you to be amazed at what you can learn if you can attend to actually listen to other people, even in a locked psych ward. You can pick up a lot of wisdom. So thank you all for participating. So we'll have a little branding and then off we go.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Midwestuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul Vanderklay, Rod Dreher, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Pajot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.
Also in today's community report, Clara, our resident sociologist, had some relevant things to say to the world.
So this is my kitchen. You can even see that there is a fly trap behind me. That's something I would have removed if I had really thought about this, because that is disgusting. Right now I am roasting chicken to eat later today, and I feel like I need to justify that to myself and to the world, like literally to the world, because I'm live streaming.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a Messiah complex. A Messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons. The only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
Yeah, walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord, and hold my hand.
Walk with Moses.
You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Say, walk with me, Lord. How y'all doing?
Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk
with me.
Walk with me.
I'm on my city.
Yeah, Lord.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus
to walk with me.
To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. He walked with David, and he's a little shepherd boy. You made him a great king. And David shouted for joy.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. all along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord, walk with me. You gotta walk with me, Lord.
Yeah! That was rocking great, brother.
Oh, yeah.